This is Eric Chen. Eric, okay, so I want to ask you first, what do you think are the most significant benefits to tutoring mathematics in a one-on-one space?
Tutoring, I think, well, the one-on-one lets the tutor sort of adjust the way that they teach and sort of the pace that they teach at, and they can focus on like problem areas or specific things that the student might not understand. Whereas I guess like in a teaching environment, they have to cover everything, but they might not know exactly what the student doesn't understand. So.
And how, that's interesting. How do you know how to adjust pace or what the student understands?
A lot of it, I think, is you can kind of see their foundation or fundamentals in how they work out a problem. So you can see if they had like troubles in a prior area. Like if there's a question that involves factoring, but the topic isn't factoring itself, you can kind of see that maybe they're having some troubles there, and you can sort of adjust the questions or adjust how you ask them so that they understand it better, something like that.
And so is that kind of like fundamental knowledge that you're looking at, that you're kind of noticing their foundations that lead up to a particular problem?
It's both. It's both their fundamentals and sort of how they're grasping the new topic as well.
Okay.
So, right, if there's some part of the new topic that they don't understand, you can also kind of focus in on that as well. Yeah.
Okay. And have you worked with larger groups of students?
I think I've only worked with maybe 3 at most.
What size of group do you think the benefits of one-on-one tutoring might dissipate? Did you see that happen with your group of 3, or?
Well, definitely, at least for me, I have to sort of focus on how both the students are learning, or all 3 of the students are learning. And actually, just with 2 students, you kind of see that one student might understand it almost immediately or just a lot faster than the other student. And you kind of almost work at different paces. One of them's kind of like going through really quickly, and then the other one you kind of have to just pay a little more attention to, something like that.
Is it almost as if so you said you're working at different paces, so you're almost teaching, like you're almost teaching differently for 2 kids?
In the same tutoring session. So, yeah, it can get a little, not difficult, just you just have to work at 2 different paces. But sometimes the other student will help too, because they're probably friends coming in, so they'll help each other out.
Right. So how would you see that, like, in a classroom? Would it?
Well, yeah. So that's compounded even more when you have like 20 students in a classroom. The teacher, and I've thought about this as well because I had considered, high school teaching.
That's right. Yeah.
So I was thinking about like. If I'm teaching to a classroom, I can't really pay attention to how each individual student is learning. It'd be up to them to like come to me if they felt like they were behind, something like that. But like I wouldn't be able to tell who's actually getting it or who's not.
So there's something about maybe the ownership then of the success. Would you say, like you said, it's up to them? But in a tutoring session, would you say that it's up to you?
Kind of, yeah. Obviously, they come to us to get help, and so they kind of know.
Right.
They already know, and then we can help them further by seeing how they're doing and adjusting the way we teach.
Okay. Interesting. Good. Okay. How do you observe, kind of along those lines, how do you observe students' mathematical thinking? So you said you're observing it a lot.
Yes.
How are you observing it?
There's some simple things like how often they use their calculator. I know some students are like, they have good fundamentals. If they don't, like, their first instinct is not to reach for the calculator. They kind of try to do it in their head. Or like how they're doing just the simple things like doing 7 plus 6. They can like split the 6 up into 3 so that you get 10 plus 3 instead of 7 plus 6. Something like that. And just, I guess, just how quickly they work through. Like, so if they're really comfortable with it, they won't really think as much about the basic things. They just go through them and they know how to do it.
Do you have an example from working with a student in Algebra 1, maybe a recent student that you observed, that you can say that you observed certain thinking from the student?
Certain thinking.
Like where you're like, oh, I see what you're doing, or I see what you're thinking, or maybe in a way that surprised you?
Let me think here. Well, I have had a couple of Algebra 2 students recently who are, like, I can kind of say that they're pretty strong in math, I would say. I think one of them, they were actually just doing foiling, I guess, and well, it's just they like combine the middle terms without writing them out. So that's a bit of like foresight that they've had.
Right. Yeah.
You know, normally they would just, you know, they do the inner and the outer of the foil, but they were just doing it in one step, which is good foresight.
Right. So you're kind of looking for mathematical fluency in a way, or their manipulation of things, or foresight of knowing that sort of that's the next step or what's ahead.
Yeah, they probably call it like number sense, something like that.
As opposed to most students, how would you describe? Like most students in that problem would maybe think only line by line, or even struggle of like, what do I do next? So that told you that one move, should we say, kind of showed you foresight.
Right, yes. Just their way of thinking.
Would that then impact how you present or approach further topics in the session?
Yeah, definitely. I, once I get a sense of how comfortable or how fluent they are with math or just working with numbers, you can I either say things in a different way or show them a method, show them more methods, or something that they might be interested in.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Okay. That's a cool thing to think about.
Yeah.
How do you set the agenda in a tutoring session? So, a student sits down in front of you and they're sitting there, and what is your agenda setting process?
I always ask them if they have a test or a quiz coming up, so I kind of know like where in the topics they are. Like if they just started learning something, or if they're close to the end of learning something, and then I see what they have to bring in. Usually it's like homework or a review or something like that. If it's a review, I try to make sure that we've covered everything that the topic has to say. Like obviously we want to finish the review, and so they get a sense of what the test is going to be like, but I also want to cover all the topics and make sure they understand everything. If they're bringing in something new, I'll kind of we'll work through it, but then I'll also try to link it to something they're going to be learning in the future, or just kind of give them a little glimpse of what's coming up. So
you mentioned kind of what's coming up. Like, what do you think is the significance or importance of that piece of it?
So it's good to see the big picture, I think. So you're not just learning some algorithm or some formula. You're like, okay, well, why am I learning this? And what's it going to be used for? Or what does it connect with? So yeah, it's good to know what's coming up and what's.
Do you ever discuss what's coming up in future years, or is it just future units, or?
Yeah, actually, I saw this recently with pre-cal. Right now in pre-cal, they're doing like functions and like writing equations based on word problems. or like dealing with composite functions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying how this directly relates to some of the calculus things we're going to be doing.